Welcome to part 2 of the special compilation episode that we did featuring some of your favorite Divorce and Beyond experts, all sharing their most memorable cases and clients. There are some crazy stories, as well as some others that make you stop and think, but all of them have great takeaways to help you through your journey through divorce and beyond. In part 1, we heard from some amazing guests, people like Bill Eddy, Dr. Elizabeth Cohen, and Tracy Malone. And now we continue with part 2, where you're going to hear from Debra Doak, Evan Schein, Karen Millen, Uzwa Khan, Lisa Koski, Michelle Dempsey Multack, Olivia Summerhill, another one from Kate Anthony, and of course, from me, because you didn't think I'd get left out of all the fun here. So stay tuned and get ready to binge some more most memorable cases with Divorce and Beyond. So now I am joined by our guest, Debra Doak. Debra was with me not that long ago, right, Debra, with Tracy Callahan, one of your co-founders of the Divorce Coaches Academy. And you guys did that really popular episode on how to find the coach you need to succeed in your divorce. It's been a really, really helpful episode. Lots of great feedback. Because as you know, I'm a huge fan of divorce coaches, but people need to know more about what coaches do and how to find a good one. So that was a great episode. Thank you.
Awesome. So excited to do that with you.
Yeah, well, and I want people to know you are a certified divorce coach, but you're also a CDFA, you're a mediator yourself. Mm-hmm. You are the author and survivor of a high conflict divorce yourself, but author of High Conflict Divorce for Women. So you work with clients in a variety of different ways. So I'm not sure which field your most memorable case comes from, but why don't you share with us your most memorable case?
My most memorable case. So I do all those things really all in under the umbrella of divorce coaching. That's really where I sit. That's really where I think we can have the most impact is at the individual level, right?
Yeah.
And so I was working with a client. We were going over financials. We were doing the rest of the settlement. There weren't children involved. We were getting through most of that pretty well. And then we came to a screeching halt when it came to pet custody.
Oh, yeah.
Pet custody. So slowly but surely, we got the custody worked out. And then it fell apart because they could not agree on who would take the dog to the groomer. Now, I am not necessarily a dog person, and I certainly don't understand the different ways you can get your dog groomed. But I guess this was a standard poodle. And I think there's a floofy way you can get them groomed where their paws have like the big fluffy balls on near their, and their tail can be all poofy. And then there's a way you can get them groomed that is more streamlined.
Yes. And my uncle had a standard poodle, so I have this very, very vividly in my mind.
Okay. So one of them was very attached to the floofy form of grooming, and one was more attached to the streamlined, and they were arguing. This was months of mediation, attorneys involved. I'm going to guesstimate they spent $20,000 arguing over floofy versus streamlined grooming of this pet. This was where we got stuck. Now, this was a high net worth case. We had no trouble with the 401k, with spousal support. I'm not saying we had no trouble, right?
Right, but you got them done.
We got her done. But when it came to how to groom the poodle, we got stuck. And it was one of those cases where you just shook your head. And what was the final outcome and agreement? Same thing we always get. You're going to alternate. Okay. The poodle needed to get groomed every 6 weeks. And so what happened? One time when it was grooming, the poodle got floofy. And the next time the poodle went to the groomer, it got streamlined. And they took turns. Wow, what a concept. A compromise.
A $20,000 compromise.
A $20,000 compromise, because sometimes you get what you want in divorce and sometimes you don't. And the real lesson, I think, here is often one party comes in thinking they know what's best. And that just isn't the case. That's your opinion. And
Right.
the other party is allowed to have an opinion. And that's true whether we're talking about human children or fur babies.
Yeah, I've had cases with the fur babies, and as a dog person myself, I get it. But in the end, let's just think for a minute. Do you think the dog cared whether he had floof or streamlined? Right? It becomes, I always say to people, the most expensive words in divorce are it's the principle. It's the principle of the thing. I think, it's a standard poodle and therefore it should have a standard poodle cut.
Right.
And it doesn't matter if you're a high net worth case or a more average financial case, or, people who are having a hard time making ends meet. That's wasted money, wasted effort, wasted days of your life you won't get back.
Wasted emotional turmoil, right? How many extra bottles of wine did you have to buy or go out with your girlfriends, right, to bitch about this? It's just, the cost is so high to do that. The other option is get your own poodle.
Yeah.
Cut it floofy every time you want to.
Have as many dogs as you want.
Right?
Another thing that strikes me though, because you mentioned that they had worked through many of the other issues already.
Yeah.
And I'm wondering, was it one of the last issues that they needed to get through?
It was one of the last issues they needed to get through. And so it's also perhaps I'm not quite ready to be done, right?
That's what I was wondering. Exactly. And that's what we see as professionals very often.
Yeah. When I agree on this, I'll be divorced.
Yeah.
It's like the last bastion of
maybe
attachment.
I need to draw a line here and drag this out longer. And I think if you talk to divorce attorneys and professionals in all different fields, you will find that it is a very common phenomenon that whatever that last issue might be, and it's usually a smaller thing. It's usually something that isn't one of the major issues, but it becomes the line in the sand and I think they're exhausted by what they feel they've already given up.
Right. And so this is the one thing I'm not going to give on.
Yeah.
I already negotiated spousal support. I negotiated parenting time. I gave up on everything else I wanted. And this,
Yeah. The hands. I love the hands on the fist the hands on the hips. And what I would say, because I've been in the room with a client in that position, and I've been the mediator in the room with people in that position. Yeah. And I would always say, it's very easy to see what you've given up, but take a moment, take a deep breath, and also consider what you've gained and where your partner in this process has given, because likely that's what they're seeing as well. And always keep in mind that being done and your peace of mind is worth an awful lot.
It's worth an awful lot. Yes.
Even if your dog is floofy.
Even if your dog is floofy, right? But what could next Wednesday look like for you if this were done?
Yeah.
If this were finished? What could next Saturday be like if you didn't have another mediation session, if you didn't have another attorney bill? What could that feeling be like for you?
Yeah.
If this were done.
As you know, I'm obsessed with the beyond. That's it. Like, what if your beyond could start next week?
Right.
If this could be done.
And, that's one of the things we work on in coaching a lot, because when people have been in that acrimonious marriage, right, really unhappy marriage, and then they're in the conflict of negotiating a divorce, I say you're wearing gray glasses, and it's really hard for you to envision what that life could be like. And so I spend time with clients dreaming about, as part of like when we're working on their budget and the priorities of what they want in their settlement, it's also like, well, what do you want your day to look like?
Yeah.
Where are you going to wake up? What are you going to do in the morning? What kind of coffee mug are you going to drink out of? Like, how can we start to dream about the beyond. There you go.
Mine says positivity, please, my coffee mug.
Positivity, please. Yes.
Yeah.
But, start to think about your life is not always going to be this. You're going through the temporary hard.
Right.
So that you can get to peace and your own choices. You can have, pink giraffe bed sheets if you want. You can have, right? You don't have to have sports posters in your den. You could have flowers like you have on your wall. What's this going to look like for you? And try to get them to make that pivot.
So think of the power of that. And I think that's one of the great takeaways from this is often if you're feeling like it's come down to a pinpoint vision, open your eyes up to that future. And I love your tip there of really paint that picture in your mind, not just of these big and lofty, I'll be able to do, I can go on vacation whenever I want or this, but what does your day look like in your beyond? Paint that first day and get there. It's beautiful. Right.
That first day, or what's that one thing you're going to buy for your new place that he would have hated and complained about?
Not a Barca lounger, I can guarantee it, ladies.
Not a Barca lounger and not a picture of the Cincinnati Bengals. I'm in Ohio.
Yes.
Right. What's the thing you're going to buy that he would have hated? And you can just put that crap up with abandon.
I love it. Well, perfect takeaway. And I can see why it's a memorable case for you, Debra. For listeners, what's the best way to get in touch with you?
My website, which is my name, Debra, Debra, Doak, DOAK.com.
Okay. And that'll all of your information will be in the show notes, everyone. But thanks for coming back, Debra.
I love it. So fun.
Well, now I'm joined by former guest, rock star family law attorney in New York, Evan Schein, also the host of the Shine On podcast. Evan, it's so nice to see you. Thank you.
Susan, it's great to be with you.
I was just telling Evan that his prior episode, Everything You Need to Know About Depositions, is one of the most popular episodes. And on the YouTube channel, he's a YouTube star for Divorce and Beyond because his episode, I think, is the number 3 episode of all time. And people love that video. There's all kinds of help. So if for those who haven't had a chance to listen, Evan really sat down with me that day and talked to me about depositions and sort of prepped the listener as he would prep his own client for a deposition. And, that's the type of invaluable assistance that you need if you're going into that situation or a deposition is in your future. So go back and listen to it. But I'm thrilled and I'm very excited, Evan. My attorney colleagues have had some really memorable cases that they've been sharing, and I can only imagine that yours is as well. So I'm looking forward to hearing it.
And Susan, even thinking about this, it was fun for me to sort of take a trip down, memory lane. And obviously I've had, thousands of, divorce cases over the years. One of the cases that stands out to me, probably I just started practicing. I was 6 months into the practice and I found myself practicing family law, practicing divorce law. And I'm trying to figure out what that really meant. I'm trying to figure out, what it looks like. I'm trying to figure out, what this is all about. And I'll never forget one of the cases I had that always sticks with me. It taught me so many things. And when I go back in time and think about it, I represented a woman and there were no kids and she was in her early 50s and 27, 28-year marriage. And her husband came home and she thought she had the perfect marriage. She thought everything was fantastic. The trips, the vacation. She thought that everything was as picture perfect as you can imagine. And her husband came home one day and broke her heart, told her, blindsided her that he wanted to separate, that he wanted to get divorced. He was having an affair, someone 20 years younger, somebody he worked with, and she was crushed and she was devastated. She gave up her career. She wanted to have kids. Her husband did not. And she sacrificed so much for him, so much for the relationship, so much for the marriage. And one of the reasons the case sticks with me, even to this day, is because for me, it wasn't the financial piece of the case. It wasn't the business. It wasn't the complex valuations. It was really about what it taught me as a practitioner. the emotional side of divorce. This was someone who was absolutely devastated, absolutely crushed by learning that her husband for 27, 28 years wanted to separate at this point in life. And so as an attorney, I realized very soon into practicing that there's a whole nother layer to this. And in fact, what we do as divorce attorneys is probably much more of that, understanding the psychology, understanding the emotional impact. And one of the lessons I learned from this was, treat your clients the way if you had a family member, a brother, a sister, a parent, if your family member was going through divorce, how would you want them to be represented? And so one of the things that I've always prided myself in is communication, getting in touch with your clients, communicating, responding. We have a firm philosophy, which is there's no phone call, no email that goes unresponded to, or a phone call that doesn't get returned, because you're dealing with people and their lives. And it's an incredibly important work, and people's lives are turned upside down. And that's something that from 6 months, out from, starting to practice up until this day, it's something that never leaves my mind.
Wow. It says a lot about you as a practitioner that is the case that sticks out for you. And, for listeners, I think it's such a valuable point, because when you hear marriage, no children, many lawyers' minds will just go to, oh, well, then it's a simple financial unraveling, right? All we need to do is figure out the money and these two people can go on with their lives. And you very aptly described what I imagine was grief and utter devastation for your client from an emotional aspect. Think of all the things that you mentioned, right? She had given up her career. She had wanted to have children, but did not. Those are things that are somewhat unalterable. And cannot be compensated financially in a divorce, right? They're just not things that you make up for, but they're things that your clients have to deal with. So I love your firm policy. I wish every firm out there had a policy like that. I think the number one complaint about attorneys is that they don't get back to their clients. So your clients clearly don't have that problem.
No, but you're right. It was grief. It was traumatic. It was just such an emotional experience. And I really learned that, you have obviously, you're dividing assets, right? You're dealing with alimony, you're dealing with property, but you're really dealing with the emotional and psychological part of this, which is so much of what someone's going through. And your clients, put so much trust in you as an attorney to help guide them through probably the most challenging time in their life. And there's so much trust that a client gives you. And that's something that I think, for all attorneys, it's something that people should be aware of and take extremely seriously when deciding, the type of practice that you want to have and, how you practice on a daily basis. But, I firmly believe that phone calls, emails should be responded to, whether it's days, nights, weekends. I think you're dealing with people in their lives. And if I had a family member going through a divorce, I would want them to be treated the exact same way.
Right. Well, and I love, again, I think it says quite a bit about you and who you are as a practitioner, but also as a person. And that's what, somebody said to me a while ago, but I still remember it, was that family law lawyers, it's kind of law light, like we're lawyers, kind of, we're more like therapists, we're handholders. And I think you just beautifully described the weight of what is on a family law attorney's shoulders when they are trying to help a client go through and navigate the divorce process. Yes, we have to be capable and skilled in helping them untangle their finances, but we also have to remember what they are going through and the drama for them, or the trauma really for them. There's nothing light about it, folks. I've always said it's a tough way to make a living, but you can honestly feel like you're helping people. And I know that you do every day.
Yeah, no, I appreciate it. And there's things, whether it's empathy, whether it's, realizing that, people's worlds and people's lives are just changed forever. And a lot of times it is for the better, but in that moment, trying to talk to a client and, help someone understand that, what, things will be okay. It's just going to take a little bit of time. It is a very hard thing. And I think over the years, obviously this is all I do and my area of focus, you learn, you grow, you adapt, and you really appreciate what people are going through. because people really are going from a devastating time to hopefully a better place. And you're part of your job. My thought is to help people get there, to help people get to a place that is better, that, get people to a place where, the past is obviously behind them in many respects, and that they're moving on to, better things. And sure, things are going to be different. The family structure is going to be, different, but it's really getting people from where they are now, which is at a very, very sad, very, low point, given everything that's happening, to a much better place.
Yeah. Well, whole point that the podcast is divorce and beyond, right? We're there to get them to their beyond. Most of the time we're lucky enough to hear back from clients that their beyond is better. But when we're dealing with them, they're in the divorce, they're in the moment, they're in that time. So Evan, for people who'd like to reach out to you, what's the best way to do that?
Susan, I appreciate it. This was a lot of fun, and people can get in touch. Our website is Berkbot, BERKBOT.com. My email is eschein, my last name, ESCHEIN @Berkbot.com. Again, this was fantastic. So thank you.
Well, and don't forget to go listen to the Shine On podcast as well. I've been on there, and Evan's going to be coming back soon. We're going to be doing a deep dive into the legal side of alimony. So stay tuned for that. And Evan, thank you so much. Your memorable case is memorable for some really good reasons.
Susan, this was great. Thank you.
Are joined by Karen Millen. You guys remember Karen. She was the wonderful podcast episode on It's Never Too Early to Start Healing. Her podcast is the Healing with Karen, Healing podcast, but it's no G on healing, people. So, and it's, she also has her wonderful book, An Amazing Divorce. And so go back and listen to the episode. I'll have a link to it. But Karen, I have to say, I'm actually really interested to hear your memorable story, because you work with people in so many different modalities to help with their healing. It'll be interesting, at least for me, I know my listeners as well, to hear what really stood out to you as a memorable case or client. So thanks for joining us.
Thank you for having me, Susan. It's such a pleasure to work with you and to be included in your amazing efforts to demystify divorce and help people through such a hard stage. Thank you.
Yeah, I couldn't do it without you. So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, so I was thinking there's two very, very memorable clients. One of them, I recorded an episode at the Healing Podcast. So I encourage people to listen to that. But it was someone who was completely devastated, couldn't even speak, full of grief, blaming herself for the divorce. I ruined this. This was my fault. I should have done this. I should have done that. To really, through about, I think, 8 sessions, really understanding why was it her fault and why was it not her fault, and coming to that realization and working through each and every thought allowed her to thrive and become a coach herself. But my most recent and most memorable client, Susan, was an older woman, 65, empty nester. Kids had just left college. I got her referred by a lawyer in Vancouver, and the case wasn't moving forward at all. 6 months had gone by, and she just couldn't make any decision at all, not about whether to sell the matrimonial home or the Whistler ski chalet or any decision. I said, hey, I hope you can help. And we dissected again each and every thought and belief, and we challenged them, we questioned them. And it was, again, guilt and not being worthy and not being capable. And so a lot of the things that came out, and that she reminded me of the most memorable case, but it's a lot of what I work with divorced women, which is my fault. They blame me that we nagged them to death and that we didn't cook well and that, they never ate our meals, or that they had a shopping issue, or that, a lot with assets when the man was working and they had stayed home. So it was like, it was his family property he inherited. How am I going to keep 50% of it? And a lot of guilt and a lot of lack of worthiness. So we go each and every single thought, why was it your fault? Again, why wasn't it your fault? why are you not capable? And he's like, well, I haven't managed finances. I haven't ran a business before. I don't know what I'm going to do with this money. To, why are you capable? When was the last time you managed money? And they're like, oh yeah, wait, before I got married, I started a business. I had paid my own home. I had managed my own money. I said, well, can we get that strength to kind of do it again? Wow, yes, I can do it. Or not being worthy of the assets, not being worthy of what they were getting, not being worthy. I had this client was like, so what was your thought? And it's like, that I'm a piece of shit. I'm like, oh no. What do you mean? He's like, if he left me, it's because I'm unworthy. And I'm like, okay, so why are you unworthy? And I remember speaking to her, if she ever listens to this episode. I'm not going to say that again. This just can't come out of my mouth. But why do you feel that way? And again, all this very petty things, like, because I wanted to take my kids to church, because I didn't, the whole cooking thing comes up a lot.
Yeah.
Why were you worthy? And Susan, it takes a while, a big pause. So, I mean, it breaks my heart, sort of the self-esteem and the worthiness that after being married in an abusive marriage or an unloving marriage can do to us. And so, why are you worthy? And a lot of the times I'm putting words in their mouth because I'm kind, because I'm a good mother, because I took all these kids to all the activities, because I was there when they were sick, because I didn't beat them, because I tried my best. That's good.
Yeah, that's a good one. Yeah.
Because I was loyal. I never cheated. I planned the parties. I'm like, so why are you worthy of this home? Because I helped decorate it, because I cooked in it, because I raised our children there, because I held parties, because I chose, it was home, right?
You created a home. You
created
the
a home.
Yes.
And that, coming from a space of complete devastation to coming out of it, feeling worthy, deciding what to do with your assets, what to do with what you're getting, moving on with their life. And a lot of the time, so we do a lot of, when we talk about modalities, we do a lot of, I was trained in cognitive behavioral therapy, which is analyze and dissect each thought, right, and see how true is it. Right? Because a lot of the times we make stories in our brain, right?
Oh, we sure
he left
do.
me, therefore I'm worthless. Therefore I'm not good enough. Therefore. So a lot with the capability and the worth is like, when did we feel this way before? Right? So for this client, she was the third of three boys, and she was the baby, and she was never good enough. She was never smart enough. They never listened to her. So she married the same thing. And we work on healing that young person, that young child who wasn't heard, who wasn't capable, who was told she wasn't capable. I'm like, why are you capable? Because I raised 3 children, because I did own a business once, because I had paid for my own home before, so while it was very memorable, it's also a very repetitive pattern that I hear and that I'm always working with. And it's sometimes sad to put words in their mouth, reminding them why they're worthy, or why they're capable, or why it wasn't all their fault, even through menopause. It's like, I nag him to death. I was always grumpy. And I'm like, listen, what else could be true? That he didn't know how to handle you. He didn't know how to cope with you. Because, girl, we all go through menopause, right? My husband gives me a hug when I'm bitchy. He sees me nagging. He's like, come here. And I'm like, or he gets me a beer, right? Like, it's not all your fault. And the relief and the excitement. And this was another case. She's like, oh my God, I've been blaming myself for 4 years. It was so good to hear from a stranger, an objective professional person. He couldn't handle my mood swings. Sorry, I'm going through massive hormonal changes.
I think this is so interesting because just before you and I taped this, I was talking to our friend, Dr. Elizabeth Cohen, and she was sort of on the other side of the spectrum with her most memorable case, talking about someone who was a client who was so focused on their ex, on everything, and it was all about their ex, and the ex had all the power. And this is kind of a shift. In that case, her client was kind of stuck in the victim mode. Here, it's almost as if people are turning themselves into they're victimizing themselves, I guess,
Yes.
is what I'm thinking, right? It's their internal dialogue that is making them less than or not worthy. And that's not the reality, right? But that's what they are in some way doing to themselves, which makes it even sadder.
It is. And what is sad is when we really analyze and challenge each thought, it's like, that's not true. Oh my God, I can't believe I did all this.
Yeah.
I can't believe I achieved all that. I can't believe my kids are healthy and contributing members of society that I raised, right?
Right.
That look like him and have their last name, but they came from me. So it's like,
Yeah.
It's giving, yes, that is the saddest thing is the amount of, so many of us that are hurting and hurting very deeply to create stories to continue that victimization and that, we're not worthy. And then the work is really exciting because when they feel worthy and it's coming out of their mind and it's coming out of their mouth and their thought and their gut, like, I deserve this home. I deserve this. He wasn't for me. It wasn't my fault. Then it's like, what do you want to project? Who do you want to be with? Tell me about him. What time is he waking up on Saturdays? What are you guys doing with your extra $500 a week? Like, and it's just really exciting to see that empowerment. But yeah, that was one of my most memorable cases.
I can see why it would stick out. And it actually really goes back to the podcast episode you did on divorce and beyond. It's never too early to start healing, because think about if you're in that place of I'm not worthy, I don't deserve this, and you are negotiating your divorce. Think about the disaster that combination can bring. So, for anyone out there who is listening that is resonating with that concept of I'm not worthy, think about, this is a time to start that healing process now. It may seem like you're going through a lot, but I urge you, go listen to that episode with Karen, get the book, and just start thinking about healing yourself at this point. It may be adding one more thing to your plate, but it might be the most important thing you do.
Absolutely. And that's the first step.
Oh, always.
Identifying the worthy, and then we do deeper healing modalities where I refer a lot of therapists to go heal that unworthy child, because they're not 8 anymore. They're 65.
Yeah.
Right? They're not 12 anymore. That, that brother's not there. Your parents are not there. You're a grown-ass woman, and it's time to go get anything you want and thrive. Yeah.
And be happy.
Exactly.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Well, thank you so much. That is like the perfect memorable case. I can see why that would stick out for you. And I'm so happy that they found you. So thank you so much, Karen.
Thank you, Susan. I'm so honored.
So now I am joined by our friend, Michelle Dempsey Multack. Hi, Michelle. How are you?
Hi, I'm good. I love that you're doing this. I'm so happy to be here.
Well, I'm excited. And just for listeners who have not met Michelle, I can't imagine you haven't. Michelle is a divorce coach extraordinaire. She is the creator of the Moms Moving On podcast. And importantly, she is the author of Moms Moving On. She's been on the podcast twice before, once to launch the book and once also just to help you move on beyond your divorce. But Michelle's joining us today because we're going to talk about, Michelle, what's the one case or client that stands out for you, and why do they stand out for you?
So I have a client that I worked with very early on when I first started divorce coaching. And I remember not being able to shut off my fear for her. She was not married to her children's father. They split up and he moved out of state. He was somebody who really, really, really liked to get his way. And I don't think he had ever been told the word no. So instead of fighting for partial custody for the twins, he decided to fight for full custody. And this sent my client into a tailspin. And because I was so new at this, I was just constantly worried for her. And it was, months and months of back and forth. And I was working with her to try and figure out a potential, shared custody schedule that would work with somebody out of state. He is a doctor, works crazy hours. Lo and behold, at the end of the day, She didn't lose custody of her twins. He actually ended up with a very small percentage because he chose to move out of the state and then file. And I learned very early on in doing this, and even through my own divorce, that just because somebody asks for something, demands something, or says something does not make it true, does not mean it's going to come to fruition. And I start every new client case or coaching partnership with somebody with that fact. Like, whatever you have in your head right now that you are so fearful of, let's lay it out on the table, because 99% of the time, it's probably not going to come to fruition. The two things I think that in particular men will scare their soon-to-be ex-wives with the most are, if you leave me, you'll never see your children again, and I won't give you a dime. Well, it doesn't work like that. And time after time now, 3 years later, this has been proven to me that just because someone says something doesn't make it true.
I'm so happy that, you told the story, and I've been there as a divorce attorney. I remember when I was a baby attorney, clients come through the door with all that fear, whether it's for coaching, whether it's to be the attorney, whatever it is, because the other party knows exactly how to push their buttons, right?
Yes.
And what are the two things that scare us the most? Not having our children and not having enough money to get by. And they'll go for that because they want to get to you. So that is an amazing tip. I'm sorry that you went through that as a professional, because I know how hard it is, but look at the amazing lesson that it taught you and that you now pass on to your clients.
And it's almost true in every situation of our lives, right? Just because our fear tells us something could happen doesn't mean it's going to happen. And that's something, I've learned in therapy. Like, the worst case scenario is probably the least case scenario. So
yeah, I always tell clients, if it is something that you're really actually worried about, it's almost sure not to happen.
Right. Exactly.
Because our imaginations are way more wild than what really goes on in real life. So this has been fantastic. I love this tip for everyone and your most memorable case. So thank you, Michelle, for joining us today.
Thank you for having me.
Back with Kate Anthony. For those of you who listened to the first compilation episode, you know that Kate gave us one of her most memorable cases, but because she had two really good ones, of course, she's Kate Anthony, I thought I'd have her back to the second one so she could tell you about memorable case number 2 and the lessons that you can learn from that. So welcome back, Kate. It's good to see you.
Thank you so much. It's so good to be here. So, in the first one, it was more of a happy story. This is not as much, although it does have a happy ending. And this case is with somebody who was still is in a very, very high conflict divorce with somebody who had some kind of psychotic break. I don't know what. There is serious mental illness happening there. And mental disorder. I think there's, I think it's important that we clarify between mental illness and a mental disorder. Yes. And he's very disordered. He's very dangerous, very cunning and conniving. He would leave notes all over the house, with his strategy outlined, the lies that he was going to tell, so that she knew, right? He was a classic, really not even classic. He was an extreme gaslighting manipulator.
Yeah.
And yes. And for some reason, she was having such a hard time wrapping her brain around the fact that this man that she'd been married to for so long and had 3 children with, had turned into this monster, because she didn't see it coming.
Right.
And she is she's very naive. And so it was very hard for her to wrap her brain around what was happening, despite all of the evidence. And she ended up staying in the house with him because she was so scared to leave her children, and legitimately so, because he was psychologically torturous. He would scream and scream and scream, and she was recording everything he did. And she had recordings of him, abusing the children, verbally abusing the children, saying horrible things about her to the kids. It was a really scary situation, very scary. But she stayed in the house for so long that on one of our sessions, I noticed that her mental faculties weren't working properly.
Right.
And she was like, there was something that wasn't right. Like there was something not right. I can't even describe what it was. But I realized, the thing about gaslighting is that it's not just about someone denying your reality. It is about the purpose of gaslighting is denying your reality to the point where you actually start to go crazy, literally go crazy. You are questioning everything and you no longer have a grip on reality. That is the end goal of gaslighting. And that's where she had gotten to.
Oh no.
And I was terrified. And I said it to her because I didn't really know what else to do.
Right.
And I said to her, I need to tell you that the way that you're speaking right now today has me very, very concerned for your mental and emotional well-being, because I believe that his gaslighting tactics are starting to work on you and that you're starting to lose your grip on reality. And there was enough left of her that she was able to hear it and grab it. And she was out of the house within a couple of weeks. And later on, she said to me, I don't know what would have happened if I hadn't gotten out. And she said, I don't know what took me so long, because once she got out, the fog was clearing and clearing and clearing and clearing. And she was really seeing all of the reality. And she was like, oh my God, I can't believe I was there for so long. And I'm so terrified about what would have happened to me had I stayed a minute longer. And the sad reality and truth is that, the kids are still she still has to share custody with this man, because he's a master, and she will be in a high conflict. I mean, he's so litigious, that she will be in she'll be in court with him for, who knows how many years.
In perpetuity. It doesn't
in
end.
perpetuity. Exactly. And so the most important thing that I sort of saw and learned and really sort of got from this was how real the gaslighting is and how real the outcome can be, and really to help clients who are in these situations get out far sooner than they may feel ready to, because the danger is real. I mean, it's real.
Yeah. Well,
and that was terrifying.
Having that lens put up. And I think this is a great story for listeners, because I think people think, well, gaslighting, of course, you're going to see it. Of course, because I know my truth, you can't change my truth. So for you to actually see the effects of it and see it in someone, because I've heard that before as well and experienced it myself to a certain degree with that. While you are in these situations, and it's not just gaslighting, it's all different kinds of abuse, but you don't realize how bad things are.
Right.
And so for your client, thank goodness she had you to be able to bring that reality. And thank God she had, as you said, enough left in there where she was able to hear what you were saying.
Yeah. And the resources to get out. I mean, that was, the other thing is that she had family who was willing to support her no matter what, and to, lend her money and get her out.
Yeah.
Thank God.
Yep. Well, we know that's one of the most dangerous times, right? When someone tries to leave an abuser. That is actually, I have an episode with Victoria McCooey about how to set your plan out to leave in that dangerous time, because it's not something that is successful usually for most people. The first time, the second time, the third time. And it's definitely not successful when it's not planned.
That's right. And, the reason that it takes an average of 7 times for someone to leave an abusive relationship is that, it's easy to go, but it's not easy to stay gone.
Yeah.
Right. We pack our bags a million times, but it's the manipulation that happens after the fact that can be, draw us right back in. And because, as they say, we don't want the marriage to end. We just want the abuse to stop. Right. So of course we're susceptible, to being dragged back in.
Yeah. Now, I had a friend who did it for years, Her husband just had an alcohol problem he could not get over. And she just wanted him to stop drinking. She didn't want the marriage to end.
Right.
It's the same, it was so sad because she loved him. She loved sober him. She was not in love with not sober him, but eventually she had to get there, but it was the same situation. And, so this is, I think, an important lesson in a lot of ways for people. One of the takeaways for anyone who thinks they are in a situation with an abusive spouse, a narcissistic spouse, or, gaslighting situation, I think is, starting to make that plan to leave and getting help. Whether it be, I know you have special training in abuse and helping people with domestic abuse situations, getting to someone who can help you, because it's a time when your defenses and your ability to think rationally and clearly and to know what to do are challenged, and you need help. You need help
by design, right? They're
Yes.
challenged by design. That's
Yes.
part of the power and control. This is coercive control. And, it's the more distance you can get, the more like the clouds can start to part and you can start to see things. But if you're living in the storm all the time, you can't see anything.
You're just trying to get through the next minute, not, not thinking ahead to where you're going to be a week, a month, a year from now. So
that's right.
I'm hoping to take the same course that you took on the 40-hour domestic violence training, because I think it's that important that those of us who work in the family law and divorce arena, relationship arena, have that kind of training. So bravo to you.
Absolutely.
For taking it.
Oh,
Yeah.
Thank you. And yeah, I it's a great program. So I'm glad that you're going to do it too. It's, the more of us that are trained in it, the better,
Yep. Actually, I'll get the information from you and we'll put it in the show notes in case anyone listening wants to look into the training. I think it's a great idea.
Yeah. Oh yeah, for sure. Yeah. I think, like I said, the more people who have it, the better.
I agree. So Kate, as always, it's my listeners. We love you. I love you. They love you. Thank you so much for joining us for both of our special compilation, most memorable cases, episodes.
Anytime and always.
Okay, moving on to another special guest, another former guest on the podcast. You recognize her if you're watching the video. Attorney Lisa Koski is with me. Hi, Lisa.
Hi.
This is going to be fun. For all of you who remember Lisa, she joined us to do the episode Doing Divorce Different. And the reason we called it Doing Divorce Different is that is the name of her podcast. And Lisa is a family law attorney. She does mediation and does not have a court practice, right? Lisa, you don't go to court.
Correct.
Yay, no court. And she also has a wonderful program that she's been doing with people. How's the program going, Lisa? You talked about it in our podcast episode.
Everything is going so well, Susan. And I'm so passionate about helping people work together. And it's kind of about my story today is memorable to me because it taught me so much. So I'm so excited to be here. Thank you so much for letting me share what I've learned in my memorable story.
I mean, that's the exciting part. And I love that because some of my guests have been talking about cases that are memorable because there were lessons for people going through divorce. But a lot of my professionals are talking about things that they learned from their cases. And I think it's an interesting thing for our listeners because, hey, we're all learning and evolving as we go and grow through our practice. So I can't wait. Let's dive into your memorable case.
All right. Well, this is just one of many, but it was kind of when I first started where I was just doing mediations and I had someone call me and it was interesting. They had been fighting it out in court for years. And they were older. They were grandparents, had a really long-term marriage. And, he said, we are just so tired. We just want to be done with this. We want to come to an agreement. We want to come and meet with you without the attorneys and then come to, and then you send it to our attorneys when we agree.
Let's get rid of those troublemakers.
And they were tired of the fees. And so they just wanted to sit down and talk. So I thought, great. Yeah, this is going to be great. And like I said, it was kind of a new to me, it was in the early years of my practice. So we scheduled the appointment and they came in and they were a little bit late. And I was kind of wondering why they were late. And this is the thing that's so interesting is he said, well, I'm so sorry that I'm late. I had to pick her up from jail for punching me in the face yesterday.
Oh,
and I was like, oh no. And Susan, I almost didn't take the case, which would have been such a sad thing for me because I ended up learning so much if I would have said no. But I was so green and I sat him down and I said, can you communicate? Are you sure this is going to work? And the thing was they were both so dedicated to wanting to get it done that it worked for them. We did 2-hour sessions. And it was interesting because another thing that I learned was that when I started out, I felt like I had to kind of be the teacher or the parent and tell everyone how to act and how to talk nice. I would have a little spiel. Well, what I learned was they didn't communicate like I did. And what seemed inappropriate to me actually wasn't to them. So it was a learning experience to let them communicate how they had been communicating, not to be verbally abusive or actually fighting it out.
Yeah, no punching in the face.
Yeah, I didn't need that in my office. But so I learned that was how they communicated and that I could let that happen sometimes for people to get it off their chest and to communicate how they needed to. Maybe it wasn't the quiet way that I did, but that was just the most memorable case to me. I couldn't believe it. We came to an agreement in 2-hour sessions and they moved along and we're happy and we're actually kind, and you could see there was a love between them. So great learning curve for me.
Oh my God. Well, think about that. Gosh, this is so, so opposite, I think, of what people would think. First of all, I love that he goes and picks her up from jail to take her to the mediation session. But think about so many things in there because so many things jump out at me. One, they had spent years, you said, in court and litigating it. And then in 4 hours, they brought it to a conclusion. You said 2-hour sessions. Yeah. So that just tells you sometimes everything that's going on in the litigation process or the negotiation process or having other people doing your talking for you, which is what negotiation through counsel really is. Sometimes that's a lot of noise that isn't really getting you to the facts. And then I think it's so brilliant that you realized so early on that everybody communicates in a different way. And we are not there to change that for them unless it's something like no punching in the face, probably a good way.
Right. That's right. Yes.
Or any punching, no matter where. But that sometimes we have to let people be the people that they are in the mediation room. We're not there to change them. We're there to help them have that conversation in a safe place, and in a way that's productive. And clearly it was, because 2-hour sessions is amazing. That's wonderful.
Yeah, it was a great learning curve for me.
Well, and for them, I would expect to imagine the relief for the two of them. Cause I'm going to just extrapolate here, but there has to be, after years of litigation, so much frustration in a couple who just want to be done. As you said, he said they were exhausted and they just wanted to be done. And, the punch in the face or whatever that was, I can see just, that bursting out, but they still obviously had that ability to sit down at a table and work things out. They just needed the right guide.
I know. And I love that it pushed them forward because they were grandparents. They cared. They wanted to spend time with their grandchild. He did want her set up in a nice home. They didn't. So they actually got to end this, high conflict divorce with a peaceful outcome. And so it was just kind of magic.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, I guess they say we don't have a magic wand, but you must have something going on over there.
I don't know. I think that was a little bit of help from someone above or something.
All good. And bravo to them, because you and I both know the longer a high conflict litigation case goes on, the harder it is to get off that track and try something new. So bravo to that couple.
I know.
That they were willing to try something different. And clearly it was the right path. That's a lesson to you all that, it's never too late to mediate. That's actually an episode on the show with Claire Samuels, who's also going to be on sometime soon, everybody.
Yes, that's a great one.
Yeah. Well, Lisa, thank you so much for joining us for this. I think listen to all those little golden nuggets that came out of your memorable story. Thank you so much.
Susan, thank you so much for having me. It's a pleasure.
I am joined by my friend. You remember her, attorney Uzwa Khan. Uzwa is in Connecticut, where I practiced for so long. We actually shared office space for a while. We have been friends for years. She is a longtime family law attorney and a really good one. She also did an episode for Divorce and Beyond on how to get a restraining order. It was last position. She was working in a domestic violence shelter in Connecticut that does amazing good work for people. But unfortunately, she has a lot of experience in how to help people get restraining orders. So that episode, very necessary episode, very popular episode. But she's agreed to come back. And thank you so much for coming back as well, because I can't wait to hear, especially since we basically came up in the same courtrooms, what your most memorable case was. I wonder if it's one of the ones we had together.
Well, I'm so happy to be here again and catching up with you. It was not one of the ones we had together.
Good, actually.
It was, who was it? It was Judge Novak, if I'm allowed to say that.
Yeah.
In courtroom 3C back in the corner. And it was my first trial as a first-year associate, no second chairing. I was doing it all on my own. I was the opposing counsel with somebody who'd been doing it for 20 years. So the pressure was on.
No nerves at all, folks.
No nerves at all. My client was a 6'4" big guy, picture a trucker. So I had told him, come to court in your church suit. And he did all 3 days of trial, the same suit with his black work boots. And he was so respectful. And, he was one of those clients who, whatever you told him, he would just say, yes, okay. Okay.
A dream client, you mean?
He was a dream client. Unfortunately, after 1.5 days of his wife testifying first, this case, it was a divorce case. They had a little child, and there were allegations of abuse against my client. And so he, when you go on, it's your turn, time to put on your witnesses. So I call him as my first witness. And he takes the stand, he takes the oath. They tell him to say your name and your address. Stands up, my name is, I live at, and then off cue, off script, he goes, Your Honor, everything she said was a lie.
Oh, no.
And I can't make that up.
No, I can imagine you haven't even asked him a question yet.
No, I didn't. And I'm blushing now as I'm remembering that incident 18 years ago. And I was just aghast, and I'm waving stop, don't say anything.
Zip it. But
you know what? It was a great lesson that I learned early on, because I knew that you have to prepare your witness and you have to know what they're going to be answering and know what you're going to be asking them. But I didn't know that he would go off script or go rogue like this. So in addition to preparing him and what to wear, I should have sat down and done a mock, maybe a mock interview,
direct examination,
mock direct examination, and prepared him to hear the things that his wife would be saying against him. I knew some of the claims.
Right.
And it taught me, he hadn't told me that he had been intimate with his wife for the past 6 years because I had asked him, why are you guys getting divorced? I don't know. We just grew apart.
You didn't ask him the specific question, right? And he didn't want to talk about his sex life, probably with a young female attorney sometimes.
And I was probably too ashamed to ask, like, are you being intimate? Is that a concern? But I think it was a learning experience for me.
Yeah, well, and for him, right?
Yes. Yeah. And
well, such a good story, because I think for listeners, there's probably a few things in that they are unaware of if they haven't ever been through a trial. Even your divorce, if you're going through a divorce, you may not know this, that when you go to court, you are going to spend time with your attorney getting ready to give testimony, because especially in a divorce case, we know there are going to be two witnesses at least, right? In a divorce case, the husband and the wife, or the husband and the husband and the wife and the wife. There's always those two people are going to be witnesses. And so when you say prepare your client, I mean, we spend hours never telling our clients what to say, but walking them through what the process looks like, right? Because they're on the stand sometimes for hours.
Oh yeah, and days even.
Yes.
And the lesson that I learned was I should have prepared him for what's going to come before he testifies, what might come during testimony. And, we tell witnesses that during cross-examination, you might feel harassed, or, you might get provoked, and you have to stay calm. You have to keep your cool. And
take your deep breath.
Take your deep breaths, and if you need time, ask for it. You don't have to answer everything. You can say, let me think about it. That's, it's like the 3 T's. Think before you talk. Take your time to tell the answer and tell the truth. You have to be credible. If the judge doesn't think you're credible, your case doesn't matter.
Oh, it does. I mean, you get caught. I've told this to every client. You get caught telling one lie to a judge, and that judge is never going to believe another thing you say to them. And it doesn't matter what you lied about. People lie on the stand. You and I both have seen it, about the stupidest things sometimes. And then when people get caught, they don't understand. Well, yes, I lied about that, but I'm telling the truth about this. And it doesn't work that way in a courtroom. Once you lose your credibility, you've pretty much lost it. Yeah.
And I know I was supposed to talk about one thing only, but
bring it.
This just jogged my memory. Another trial of mine that I had, my client, unbeknownst to me, had kept, he had gone out and bought $100 gift cards and kept them in his briefcase, which he kept unlocked. So the wife took pictures of all those $100 gift cards. And he had a gold coin collection that he also kept in that briefcase, which he had failed to tell me, and we did not put on our financial affidavit. So you can imagine what scathing memorandum of decision the judge wrote on that one.
I had a similar one where, let's talk about one of my cases. I haven't done that yet. I had the client who got up and swore that she had been looking for a job unsuccessfully, and talked about all of these things that she had been doing to find a job. And then I sit down and her attorney, her husband's attorney, stands up and he pulls out of his briefcase, his magic briefcase, her work contract, her employment contract that she had just signed 2 weeks earlier for $150,000 per year salary, annual salary job. That in that entire direct examination I had done with her, she failed to mention. And I had asked her if she had found employment. So people do these things. They lie under oath, and that will always come back to haunt you.
Yeah. So never lie, and don't call out your wife if she's lying.
Yeah, not the first thing that you'd actually, the main gist there, right, is your attorney knows what they're doing. Only answer questions that they ask. We say this to people, right? Like, you don't just start volunteering information. If your wife was lying, trust me, your attorney Khan would have asked you, sir, did you hear your wife say anything that you disagree with? She might have, helped you with that. It doesn't put you in a good light with the judge. And the other aspect I would like people to know is you need to be honest with your attorney. You mentioned that he didn't tell you what might have been a difficult topic to talk about.
Yeah.
We know this we, as family law attorneys, we hear probably more about people's sex lives than we ever wanted to know, but there are some aspects that are relevant, and you need to share that information with your attorney. And if you can't, you need to find a way, like write it down and hand them a note or give them the information if you can't have a conversation with them, because it's important. I remember Uswa and I, when she also shared office space with my mentor who taught me how to be an attorney so many years ago, actually decades ago, Jim Gentile. But I remember Jim telling me when we were doing one of our very first consultations with a client for the very first time, and he always asked people to say, what is the worst thing that your spouse would be able to say about you? And that is actually one of the most important questions, exactly because of what you just said as well, right? You know, that's what's going to come out if people ever get on the stand, and your attorney needs to know how to prep you for that and how to work with it or deal with it when it comes out as evidence, right?
Right. You don't want a PR nightmare, right? You get ahead of it before having to take the store.
Yeah, it's very true. I mean, you have to give your attorney the information and the tools to work with and to help you. You're never going to have a perfect case. Have you ever had a perfect case walk through the door where just 100% of the facts were on your client's side?
Maybe on a default case.
Well,
even then, you have to make sure that the person is really defaulted. Like, are they?
Yeah, exactly. A default case is where one side doesn't show up, everybody. So yeah, it's easy to be 100% right in those. But when you have both sides, I mean, there's always something that can be, spun to look, the way that each side wants it. In fact, in law school, I don't know if in school you did this, but I remember in trial advocacy class, they'd have you get up and argue one side of a case, and then you literally walk over to the other side of the room and argue as if you were representing the other side of the case. Nothing brings home more how easy it is to spin things different ways as an attorney than just arguing something from two different points of view.
Absolutely. Yeah, it looks great when it's your case, but then you flip it and you can find the holes, which is nice that we're able to do that, but we need to know all the facts in order to do that.
We sure do. Well, a lot of good lessons, see, in your story. And this has just been such a wonderful opportunity to hear from all of our friends and former guests on the podcast. So Uswa, thank you so much again for joining us and for sharing your most memorable case.
You're welcome. Take care, Susan.
You too, Uswa.
Bye-bye.
Okay, just time for me now. I wanted to share my most memorable case. And I have to say, after 32 years, I have a lot of memorable cases, but I wanted to share this one because it's a bit of a cautionary tale. It was a client toward the end of my career as a litigator. I was representing this client, and it was a rather contentious divorce for very young children. Two attorneys. Both of the clients were attorneys. Maybe there's one lesson for my attorney colleagues out there. Gosh, divorces with attorneys for clients are a whole new level of difficult, but lovely people. But my client, who happened to be the wife, she was very, very attached for many reasons to the marital residence, to the home. It had been the only home many of her children knew, and it became very, very important for her, really a hallmark and a guiding light through the entire divorce negotiation to keep the house. And it truly was a financial hardship to do that. The divorce dragged on for quite a long time as we tried to be creative and come up with a variety of ways that it might work. The husband was very frustrated because he really didn't see how it was going to work. And for it to work, it required him to have to probably pay a lot more support than was probably legally required, and actually quite a bit more. And for my client, that seemed reasonable because it was for the children. And so that drove us to a trial date. And just before the trial date, we ended up going to mediation with a retired judge. And in the end, the retired judge just sort of took my client aside and said to her something that I had been saying to her for quite some time through the divorce. And that was that there really financially was no way to keep the house. And that in the end, it was going to wreak financial havoc on this family as a whole, as they separated and went forward in their new lives to try to maintain this home. And although she had many good reasons for doing that, what keeping the house was ending up doing was actually going to probably inflict more harm and conflict between the parents on the children. And it was interesting because it didn't settle that day in mediation. But as we were going up the steps to the courthouse for the trial, just a few weeks later, literally on the steps of the courthouse, right? We always talk about how cases settle on the steps of the courthouse or at the courtroom door. This one did. It just, the lightning bolt came down from the sky. My client realized that, you know, her position that she just was unwilling to find a way to make a new home for the kids and move forward in a different financial direction. She just realized that wasn't going to work. And in fact, we settled that case in a conference room without ever going to trial. We never started the trial. We went forward uncontested that day with handwritten provisions in the agreement. So I just encourage you all out there, listeners, as a takeaway, consider that, yes, continuity and, you know, staying in that marital home and all of those things are important for your children. But what's really important for your children is that the conflict between their parents doesn't exacerbate the situation and that they're able to move forward in a stable, secure, and financially affordable home. My client to this day regrets that divorce took so long and cost so much money and is willing to own that it was her, you know, emotional pull to that house that took it there. So it's just one story. I'm not, you know, pointing this out because everyone wants to keep the house and you shouldn't. There are very many cases where that's a great idea. But that was an emotional cost that took a financial cost and a further emotional toll on that divorce and on that divorcing couple and on that family, because my client was so firmly convinced that only one course of action was going to work. So I hope you all have enjoyed this double compilation episode. I really enjoyed getting to visit with all of our favorite experts and go over all of these tips and their stories. A lot of great insights for you, which is what we're always trying to bring you here at Divorce and Beyond. So thanks for tuning in, and we'll see you here next week.